Gary, it got pretty tense today, isn't it?
Extraordinary day, even by recent standards. You have Theresa May going to the House of Commons and explaining that she has asked for this extension up to the 30th of June and saying that, giving the impression that meaningful vote could happen next week, but they could carry on happening through April. And then, not that long afterwards, you see in Brussels the European Council President, Donald Tusk, popping up and saying, do you know what? That's the wrong date. You can't have it. At most, you can have a month shorter, but critically, you can only have it if that deal has gone through the House of Commons. He, Donald Tusk, will be sitting there watching the telly on the night to see whether the votes have actually gone in Theresa May's favour. And if they haven't, that deal, that extension offer is not available. And that means that under what Theresa May announced earlier in the day, it looked as though there was a no-deal cliff at the end of June. Under what Donald Tusk is saying, there appears to be a no-deal cliff at the end of next week, back where some hardline Brexiteers actually wanted it. It's not. This is creating an enormous flurry amongst MPs. There are febrile efforts going on to try and work out if there is any way of stopping that happening. But there was also a lot of feverish activity today because we heard that the dreaded podium was coming out again in Downing Street. As I understand it, actually, the Prime Minister is going to make a statement to the nation later inside number 10. She's been having meetings with ERG, pro-Brexit Tory MPs, with the DUP as well. I understand she's not going to make a dramatic announcement that takes us beyond what she said in the House of Commons, but she is going to reiterate in stark terms that there is this battle, as she sees it now, between Parliament and the people. And she's going to try and appeal over the heads of the MPs, over the heads of her own party, and say, I am with you, the people. I'm frustrated by all this as well. It's got to end. And she will say, again, what she said in the House, that she won't countenance a long extension, a long delay to Brexit. But there is this possibility, as Donald Tusk made clear when he spoke in Brussels, that there may actually be no delay on offer at all. Theresa May today announced she was asking the EU for the delay to Brexit. She'd said again and again she would never allow to happen. She'd applied, she said, for a 3-month extension of the Brexit deadline to the 30th of June because her attempts to win a Commons vote had run out of time.
I have therefore this morning written to President Tusk, the President of the European Council, informing him that the UK seeks an extension to the Article 50 period until the 30th of June. The Government intends to bring forward proposals for a third meaningful vote. If that vote is passed, the extension will give the House time to consider the withdrawal agreement bill. If not, the House will have to decide how to proceed. But as Prime Minister, I am not prepared to delay Brexit any further than the 30th of June.
There were shouts of resign. No sooner had she spoken than an EU spokesman announced the maximum short extension on offer was to the 23rd of May. But Theresa May's focus was those in Parliament she believed had dragged out this process.
The outcome of a long extension would be endless hours and days of this House carrying on contemplating its navel on Europe and failing to address the issues that matter to our constituents. This House has indulged itself on Europe for too long.
Mr. Speaker, to describe the parliamentary process as one of indulgence doesn't show much respect for the democratic process that sent us here in the first place.
A few hours later, the European Council President confirmed a short extension to the Brexit deadline was on offer if MPs passed Theresa May's deal.
Just now I had a phone call with Prime Minister May about these proposals. In the light of the consultations that I have conducted over the past days, I believe that a short extension will be possible, but it will be conditional on a positive vote on the withdrawal agreement in the House of Commons.
Donald Tusk suggested the British government might be deluding itself about the chances of winning in Parliament.
Even if the hope for a final success may seem frail, even illusory, And although Brexit fatigue is increasingly visible and justified, we cannot give up seeking until the very last moment a positive solution. Of course, without opening up the withdrawal agreement.
Some pro-Remain Tory MPs said the Prime Minister should be frightening Brexiteers with the threat of a long extension, not ruling it out and cheering them up.
If Theresa May's strategy is to persuade ERG hardliners to vote for her deal, then it makes no sense ruling out a long delay, which is what they fear the most. So her strategy seems to be counterproductive if her objective is to get her deal through.
It's got even less chance of getting through, you reckon?
Of course, I think they'll just get the champagne out and wait for no deal, which is what their primary objective is.
I have never felt more ashamed to be a member of the Conservative Party or to be asked to lend her support. I have great sympathy for her. I've known her for many years, and we had a personal friendship beyond and outside of this house. But I have to say, I could have wept. Wept to see her reduced to these straits, and wept to see the extent to which she was now simply zigzagging all over the place, rather than standing up for what the national interest must be.
Theresa May decided not to attend a gathering of Tory MPs tonight, where whips warned some might have told the Prime Minister directly that her time was up.
I'm not happy with the way that you and your team have conducted the negotiations, and I very much hope that you'll see your way clear standing down immediately after we achieve that vote. But if you're getting that from all of us, one after the other, surely we'll grind her down in time. And why on earth does she want to stay on? She must know she's fouled this thing up. She must know she's got it wrong. She must know she's the least popular Prime Minister in the history of Prime Ministers. Why on earth does she want to stay here? Time she went.
Meetings of cabinet ministers seem to be happening on a rolling basis through this crisis. As they left, Tory members of the European Parliament came in for a farewell drinks reception as their time in Brussels and Strasbourg comes to an end. It's not clear if Theresa May managed to look in on the drinks reception, as she was meeting Tory and DUP MPs and preparing a statement to the nation to be transmitted tonight.
Well, joining me now is the Prisons Minister, Rory Stewart. Is it now a question of Theresa May's deal or no deal?
Well, Donald Tusk has changed things a lot. So what he said is he will only grant a short extension on the condition that people vote for the withdrawal agreement. So he's ruled out granting a short extension if people were to try to push for a customs union or other options. And I think that means that the many, many Labour MPs who, like me, feel no deal would be damaging, unnecessary, very, very difficult thing for this country, but who want Brexit to happen, would feel that they ought to vote for the withdrawal agreement and then have the other discussions later.
But why should they compromise when Theresa May isn't, as things stand, giving ground on any of her red lines? Shouldn't she be moving too?
Well, because it isn't just her red lines. What's become clear with Tusk's statement today is that these lines on the withdrawal agreement are also the European Union's red lines. And I think
except you might get a longer extension to Article 50 if you went for a softer Brexit altogether. Isn't that what you should be doing now?
So regardless of whether you wanted to go to Norway or you wanted to go to Canada, you have to go through this withdrawal agreement. All the withdrawal agreement does is it's the first stage. It protects citizens' rights, it sorts out the financial payments, and it provides guarantees over the Irish border while leaving the European Union. Labour MPs should be able to accept that. What they're disagreeing about is the political declaration, and that isn't legally binding. That's something that can be discussed in the future. Let's get this vote done, and then we can move on.
Well, Labour are saying that Theresa May should abandon some of her red lines. So what you're saying, what they're saying, added up together means we're crashing out in just over a week without a deal. How can you contemplate that prospect?
Well, I think that would be deeply damaging and deeply, deeply unnecessary. But all this talk about the Prime Minister's red lines, we have to focus on the fact that these are the European Union's red lines too.
OK, but the truth is she's being reckless, isn't she? And those aren't my words. David Lidington, Cabinet Office Minister, said a week ago that a short extension would be, quote, downright reckless, making a no-deal scenario far more likely. And this is what the Prime Minister is presiding over.
The question on granting an extension is a question also for the European Union. And I think it's important to understand that pro-Europeans in Britain, and there are many pro-Europeans in Britain, should actually show some respect towards the European Union here. Tusk, European leaders are saying this is a good deal. There's a conspiracy for some reason, both from hard Brexiteers and pro-Europeans, to say this is a bad deal. It's not. It's a good deal. Unless you want to stay in the European Union or have no deal at all, this is a good Brexit deal. And the thing that's confusing me here is that the gap between the Labour position and the Conservative position is a quarter of an inch apart. I mean, the Labour Brexit Secretary...
There's a small matter of the customs union.
So the Labour Brexit Secretary has said that what he doesn't like about the withdrawal agreement is that he thinks that it has a permanent backstop. And in another breath, he says that's a permanent customs union. And then another breath, he says, I want a permanent customs union.
We'll quiz him about that. Okay. But should the Prime Minister say to MPs, to get some of the ardent Brexiteers on board, that she will not be here in a few months? She will quit if they back her deal?
Well, I don't think that would work, because I'm afraid the really hard Brexiteers, who genuinely seem to want a no-deal Brexit, seem to be so angry with this deal that they wouldn't vote for it. So I don't think that would work as a policy.
Are you ashamed to be a Conservative, as Dominic Grieve said he was today, with all this mayhem going on? No, I'm not. I think leaving the European Union was always going to be unbelievably difficult, and there'll be many people watching the programme who just don't want to leave the European Union at all, and I respect that. But if, like me, you accept a referendum happened and we're leaving the European Union, we need to do it in a moderate, practical way, and we need a compromise. We need to bring the sides of the country together. But you're
together.
not prepared to compromise.
Well, this deal is a compromise. It's a deal, but it's a compromise between no-deal Brexit and trying to remain in the European Union.
Rory Stewart, thank you very much for
you.
joining us. So now control over what happens next in the Brexit process appears to have shifted to Brussels. Our Europe editor Matt Fry is there now. Matt.
Well, welcome back to Brussels. Now, there was a sort of rather blithe assumption last week on the other side of the channel that if Theresa May asked for an extension of Article 50, it would almost automatically be granted. Well, today we've been disabused of that, and I think one could say that the EU has never been in a situation of greater control over the affairs of Britain than it is now, because, of course, every one of the 27 member states has to agree to Article 50 and its extension. And today we heard from the French this afternoon that they're not happy about this at all. They started off with this condition that was then later cast in some sort of stone by Donald Tusk himself. The question is, does he really mean it? And we'll discuss that in a minute. But I think it's fair to say that we are all now engaged in this city and in London and in the various capitals in a game of three-dimensional chicken. And that really is enough to do your head in. Now, if that game of chicken ends up disastrously, and there are many options there, then the blame game will start almost immediately. And you had a foretaste of that blame game today from MEP Hans Olaf Henkel, who spoke to me earlier today. He's a reformist in the European Parliament and a bit of an independent. Listen.
The European Union should at last admit that they are responsible for Brexit also, because Britain sort of joined a football club and these buggers started to play hockey. Britain was always in favor of subsidiarity, of competitiveness, of self-responsibility. And it was the European Union which started to change the game towards more centralization, towards socialization and so on. The European Union should recognize that Brexit really hurts them, because let's face it, Brexit means as if 19 small and medium-sized countries leave at the same time. And Britain is still the largest single customer of the European Union, ahead of China and the United States.
Well, let's bring in my guest, Agata Gostinska-Jakubowska from the Centre for European Reform. I hope I said your name correctly.
Yes, indeed.
Does Donald Tusk, fellow Pole, mean it or not when he says, get this thing passed or there's no extension?
Well, I think the situation is becoming increasingly serious. There's definitely this feeling of Brexit fatigue in numerous European capitals. And I think what Donald Tusk said today really reflects that. And plus, I think the trust for whatever Theresa May says has really diminished among EU27.
But are they seriously saying it's either no deal and you crash out, or you get your deal passed?
Well, that's not what he said today. He said, and by the way...
That's the way it's being interpreted, by the way, in London.
But Theresa May asked in her letter for a short extension. Well, then she got a response, which is indeed conditional response. But the EU needs to basically needs a clarity from London that there are some actions behind the extension, not just an attempt to buy time.
So a longer extension, if the deal is voted down, is also still a possibility.
Well, if Theresa May asks for that, then I wouldn't exclude it. But I think we really need to underline that there are more and more EU leaders who actually want to turn the page. It doesn't mean that they do want no deal, but they have been preparing for such a eventuality. And now it's actually, the ball is in UK's court.
I get the impression, especially from the French, that they regard us like a sort of gangrenous limb on the body politic of Europe. And the quicker we are amputated, frankly, the better and the easier for the body to recover. Is that fair?
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but indeed, French have been one of the strictest negotiators in here. But in a way, I believe that they will probably follow the line and they will grant a short extension. But as Donald Tusk said, there needs to be this deal pushed through the parliament, which we don't know whether that will happen.
In 10 seconds, talk to your gut. Does your gut tell you that we're going to extend or that we're going to crash out without a deal? Where are we heading with this?
I think it's really difficult to say. I mean, all options are on the table. The fact that Parliament voted last week that it doesn't want no deal, it doesn't mean that it won't happen, even by accident.
OK, three-dimensional chicken. We're still in the middle of the game. Agatha, thank you very much indeed. Well, there you heard it. It's an extremely complex situation, which tomorrow, when the EU 28 still converge on the city, will probably get even more complex.
Thank you, Matt. Well, I'm joined here in Westminster by the Conservative MP Mark Francois, who is Vice Chairman of the ERG, the team of ardent Brexiteers. So we look like in perhaps just over a week, we may well be heading for the exit without a deal. Does that thrill you, that prospect?
It does excite me. The British people voted to leave the European Union, as you say, Cathy. This is D-9, and by next Friday of next week, we could well have left the European Union, in which case we will have kept our word to 17.4 million people who instructed us as MPs to do exactly that.
I mean, you may be excited about it, but a lot of people are extremely worried about it. They're worried about their jobs, they're worried about the impact on the economy. How can you be so blithe about it?
Well, I'm not saying there wouldn't be any disruption at all, but I think any disruption that there is would be very manageable. You remember we had all the Project Fear stuff before the referendum. That all turned out to be untrue.
also remember that Brexiteers said this would be the easiest deal in the world to do. Well, it hasn't quite turned out that way, has it?
Well, no, because the Prime Minister's made it difficult. But we could leave in 9 days' time. And the British people are pretty stoic. I think in many ways they're more stoic than many of their politicians.
Kind of blitz spirit.
Well, I think they'll be all right.
So let's talk about the Prime Minister then.
Yeah.
If she says she will leave, will you back her deal?
No, we're not going to vote for this agreement under any circumstances.
Under any circumstances now?
No, because we've read it and it means we don't leave the European Union. That is why MPs have been so passionate about this. It's a draft international treaty. It's 585 pages and it's not exactly a light read. But when you read it, what it tells you is that we remain half in and half out of the EU, which is why we cannot possibly vote for it, because that betrays the vote of 17.4 million people. We, the ERG, are fighting to honour the decision of the British public. That's what we're about.
Really? There's no way Theresa May will get your support at all. So why shouldn't she just tack to a softer Brexit to try and get as many Labour votes as possible and get her deal through that way?
Because a softer Brexit, a customs union, again, doesn't leave the European Union. That's what the people voted for. And remember, we're the people. We're the politicians. We work for the people. We don't ask them to report to us. We report to them. They employ us. They had a referendum. They took a decision. They gave us an order, which is what we want to leave. A customs union in Norway doesn't do that.
And a lot of people are hopping mad that they see you and others digging in, refusing to compromise.
Well, we did try to compromise on the 29th of January. We voted
just
for
that one day.
Well, we tried to compromise. There was a thing called the Brady Amendment, which basically means that we would leave. I'm really going to look forward to looking that guy in the eye in 9 days' time when we've left. The Brady Amendment basically meant we would have taken it. Yeah, we would have taken out the backstop.
I'm really sorry. We have not got time to go into the Brady Amendment right now. I'm afraid we're out of time. But thank you very much, Mark Francois.